G'day C3 parents. Welcome to a new series called Parenting 101. There are so many awkward questions and difficult questions that our kids have, or situations or conversations that we actually have to have with our kids. So today we're going to dive right into a very difficult topic and a very difficult conversation that every parent is going to face sooner or later with their children. And we're going to talk about death. How do we talk to our children about it? There's a variety of situations that create the need to actually have this conversation with our children. Just a disclaimer, we are not going to discuss religious rights and religious belief sets in this segment or in this video. We are just going to talk about the simplicity and the importance of the conversation and how do we talk to our children about this specific topic as honestly, as openly, and as from an understanding perspective and consciously with our children. Whether we lose a loved one or a pet, there's always going to be an opportunity or a situation where you're going to have to speak to your children about it. So today I want to make it easy for you. I want to give you an acronym to remember when the time arrives that you actually have to have this conversation with your child. I know most of us try to avoid the conversation until it's a topic that's right at hand. It would be preferable to have gentle conversations before such a situation actually arises with our kids, but most of us only really want to broach the topic when it's actually real and tangible in your household and in your home life. So the acronym is GATE, G-A-T-E. The G is for grief, when we look at the 5 stages of grief. The A is for age-appropriate information. So how will I give that information to my child regarding the situation and as it pertains? T is for truthful, honest, direct conversation. And E is for teaching them empathy or having empathy for them. So let's look at the 5 stages of grief. Now, as you can see, I did not number it like number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And reason being is, yes, that is identified as the 5 stages of grief, but we need to understand and comprehend that these stages don't necessarily run 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It actually can get jumbled up. People will move through these different stages, whether it's yourself, whether it's your child, that we will move through these different stages at different times, for different time periods, and in a different order. It just depends on who you are and how you deal with life in general. So the first stage that we're going to look at is the anger stage. Now, anger is the bodyguard of all our negative emotions, whether it's disappointment, whether it's sadness, whether it is anything that we experience negatively that we're trying to suppress or that we're struggling to deal with, usually would come out on a level of anger. So our kids will throw tantrums. We will probably feel angry too if we have to process or work through a death of a loved one. But anger is literally the bodyguard of all the negative emotions. And anger is often the most visible and in your face emotion that someone will show for when they are grieving or when they're processing extremely traumatic events. So watch out for anger, and anger can come and go. It doesn't mean if you've finished with, or if you've gone through one stage, that stage won't revisit. So anger often almost preludes the next stage, and then someone will get to a stage and then they'll get angry again, and that is part of processing, because that's how our brains actually process. It's as if it's processed little snippets at a time, and anger is the bodyguard that only allows these small bits through at a time. The next one is negotiation. We often see it portrayed as the what if moments. We see them negotiating rules, we see them negotiating the whole existence, but can I try to phone grandma, or can I then rather get a new puppy? Because it's a form of avoidance of this very, very difficult situation and this emotional pain that we are feeling and experiencing. We've got anger, we've got negotiation, then we've got denial. And very often our kids might look like they're in denial, and this is quite a tricky one to assess, where they behave usually very shortly after the death of a loved one or a loved pet, where they kind of are almost flippant about it, as if it just didn't matter, it didn't happen. It's once again a way their brain and their body and everything is trying to protect them to slowly process the loss. So denial is sometimes a very useful and important stage, but I promise you they will move out of the denial and get to a point where they start facing the whole package of what they are facing when we're talking about death and that kind of significant loss in someone's life. The next phase is depression. Now, we all have bad days, so that's also once again a very fine line to manage and to identify in kids. But kids in general bounce back faster with disappointments and small hiccups than what they would do after the loss of a loved one. And we can have a look out for depression. Part of depression often looks blaming themselves, looks like maybe emotional eating, bratty behavior. Once again, that whole tantrum, that almost anger, or being lethargic, not really want to do something, dragging their feet, very teary. The slightest thing can get them to start crying, but depression in kids can also come out as stress triggers, which means all of a sudden they don't have the resilience to push through, to do the next activity or to take the next responsibility, or they ride their bike and they've got no issue, and all of a sudden the first time in years they fall off their bike and it's completely the end of the world. The slightest bump during their depression or during this depressive stage can literally send them spiraling into an emotional crash and emotional meltdown, and we need to be aware that it's not them being bratty or them being spoiled or being ungrateful or any of the other labels this kind of behavior or not resilient this kind of behavior has. It actually means that they're really struggling to cope emotionally. And here's the kicker: it can take 3 weeks, it can take 6 months, it can take 2 years for someone to process the loss of a loved one, even the loss of a pet, because death is really difficult to manage and process, and our minds process it very, very slowly because it's a huge trauma and a huge loss. So you can't, after 6 months, if your child is all of a sudden showing depressive behavior, just think, oh, they're just going through a stage. Yes, they're going through a stage, but they're still grieving. Then the last one is acceptance. Now, acceptance is when they've made their peace, when they've accepted it. And there's a difference between a flippant, oh, okay, cool, and we carry on, because that is denial, and where it is a true acceptance, where they can comfortably talk about the loved one or the pet that they've lost, when they're not trying to avoid the topic, when they're not trying to avoid the emotions that goes through this. And you yourself might be on one side of one stage and your child might be on a completely different stage. So it can become a bit of a clash, because like I said, the stages runs differently, and people don't necessarily go anger and then to acceptance. They can jump around. So be extremely aware that loss of love, something like death, is an extremely traumatic event, and it takes time and sometimes years to process, and none of us can give our children nor ourselves a specific timeline of buck up buddy and now you have to carry on. You carry that weight and you carry that pain for the rest of your life, and its acceptance doesn't mean you forgot the pain. It is you are mentally and emotionally capable of living a full life even with that pain present, and there, that little box with the pain is still there, and every time that you tap against the box you still feel the emotions, but it's not crippling you. It is not damaging your quality of life. When we're talking about age appropriate, the A in GATE, right, we're talking about what kind of detailed information do I give my child when we're talking about the impending death or the death that has happened. For instance, if I have lost a family member in a car accident, I will not tell my 4-year-old the detail of what kind of injuries the person had, what kind of too much detail about how the collision happened or why it happened. I will try and stay on the surface but still be honest and truthful. So if it was, let's say for instance, a car accident that killed a family member or killed a loved one or drove over the dog or the family pet, what we do is we actually discuss it mindfully. So for a 2-year-old, I will say this person has passed away, there was a car accident and they didn't survive. I'm really sorry and I feel sad with you. So with that, you're giving them the details because they will always ask how and why. And when the why comes, then once again, age appropriately discuss the concept of death, either from your personal religious perspective and how you as within your faith view death, or even it is okay to say, I don't know. Do you have any idea how much power is in the words, I don't know? Because honestly, we don't know why. We know how, but we don't really know truthfully why we have to lose a loved one or a pet. And that is the crux of the thing, of being that honest, of being able to admit, I don't know. But keep it age appropriate. For a teenager, once again, I won't go into the graphic content because we don't want to scar our kids even further. But I will most probably say, you know what, there was a severe brain injury or they were dead on impact, or give additional information so that they've got more things to work with to process this death. Once again, not the graphic side, literally facts and help, because facts is something that you can work with. But do not lie. So very often we want to soften the blow by lying, by protecting those we love, and then that lie will catch up, and when that lie catches up, it is a huge shock to your relationship with your child and to the system, and it can actually then spiral into a different kind of grieving process because your kids didn't have, or that person didn't have the opportunity to truthfully process what has happened and really worked through it. The T, talking honestly, like I've said with the age appropriate, once again talking honestly, and talking honestly is extremely important. That when we talk honestly, we talk about the pet or we talk about our loved one, that we don't do what people often do at funerals and just smooth over the rough edges of who that person was. Be honest about how you felt about this person, what you will miss, what you won't miss. Talk about this person. Give permission to your child to talk about this person as honestly and vividly as they want to. When they're in the angry stage, they might actually just focus on the faults of that person, because that is a way of them to express their pain. When they're going through the depression stage, they might only focus on the good of that person to express their pain and loss. You yourself, the moment will go through phases where you'll go, oh, good riddance, or oh man, I really miss this person. I wish I could pick up the phone and phone. That is part of the grieving process, and giving permission to have these honest conversations and talking, and not shying away from the facts of who that person was, because no person is solely a great person or solely a bad person. That's the complexity of humanity. And allowing those conversations, you're giving your child permission to process and work through it. If we don't talk about the deceased, if we don't talk about the pet that passed away, we're literally teaching them to bottle up what they're feeling, the questions that they have. And once again, it becomes an emotional hurdle. It's not a crutch, it becomes an emotional hurdle for them, for their futures, for how they connect with people, with the ability to process broken relationships. And not being very honest about it actually gives them a false sense of what's really going on, and they actually experience extreme rejection when they're not allowed to talk about how they feel and about how much they miss, or them being scared of sharing their experience of this loss. And ironically enough, so many families have found that when they actually have consistent talks and chats about the person that passed away or the pet that passed away, as a whole family, they heal faster, and that space is kept. And that it's okay to grieve, it is okay to sometimes feel sad, and it makes it so much easier to reach a point of acceptance and the ability to move forward, even with the reality that that pain and loss is there, it is present, it will always be. The last one, empathy. And you've seen an example, what I've said right in the beginning when we spoke about grief. When we show empathy to our children, it is that acknowledgement of that their emotions and what they're feeling currently is valid. Yes, my child, I can understand that you're angry. I'm angry too, or I was angry yesterday. I also feel sad. Yes, I can hear your sadness. It is not easy to lose someone or easy to lose a pet. I can understand that. That kind of empathy, tapping into their emotions, give them first of all permission to feel and to acknowledge this loss, and it gives you permission to feel and acknowledge this loss. And once again, that empathy, that connectedness will move you forward as a family to grieve together, to grow together, to stay together, and to process all of this. It has been a very serious topic today. Please stay safe, people. If you like this topic and you would like to have more conversations like this, please hit that like button, subscribe, ring that bell, follow our channel, and please comment below if you have any questions or any things that you would like to add to this specific topic or to this conversation. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you on the next installment. Goodbye.